Hey there, old souls, it's Dr. J, and today we're going to talk about multi-dimensional being. Now, we're going to cover a few aspects of this topic in this video. First, we're going to talk about resistance to the idea of being multi-dimensional beings. Then we're going to talk about reasons to consider the possibility and evidence. And then, maybe most significantly, our main focus today is the value and importance and application of this very idea and reality or possibility. So let's start off with resistance. A lot of you watching this probably have already considered that we are more than just our bodies, more than just our thoughts, and that through our ordinary senses and our ordinary emotions, thoughts, and physicality, we can access and connect with a greater reality, so a dimension beyond this one. And most of us are probably reasonably comfortable with the idea that there's more to us as individuals, meaning that we have a consciousness that's greater, or maybe we have something like a soul, or we are a soul, a spirit on a human journey, which of course is the very core premise of the old soul republic. But then we can get into other topics, right? And other topics in the multi-dimensional sort of space include, life after death, the ability to communicate with people that have passed on, the existence of subtle energy, healing energy, divine energy, the capacity to communicate with beings that have never been in a body, interstellar beings, aliens, angels, spirits, ancestors, not to mention all kinds of potential other realms and realities that we may exist in. Now, it's important to remember that in the world's religious traditions, and by that I don't mean Christianity and Judaism, I mean Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, indigenous traditions. I mean, like, if you look around the world and throughout time, you'll find that there are persistent explanations of a complex reality that goes beyond what is physically observable. So whether it's the Buddhist bardos, or whether it's multiple heavens, as we hear of in Islam, or in ancient Judaism for that matter, we can look around the world and find all kinds of versions of multidimensional reality, multidimensional self, and as such multidimensional living. However, what I find, and this will be true for some of you, but not all of you, I find that where I get a little bit stuck is in the contemporary exploration and teaching about multidimensional living, because it becomes quite fantastical. Now, I believe, you need to know that I believe in this, I've experienced this. I don't have a doubt that we are multidimensional beings. I don't have a doubt that miracles are possible. I've seen these things. I've experienced these things personally, and I've even been a part of them. So when I say that I react to the fantastical nature, what I mean is that the claims go from extraordinary to, well, I don't know how to say it. Something that sets one teacher or one system aside or apart as really the most exceptional, right? So I think what happens is we see phenomena like John of God, or we see phenomena like Osho, or we see different great masters and teachers who can do amazing things and work with an alternate reality. And then what starts to happen is that a kind of culture builds around it. Sometimes ego builds around it. Sometimes profit builds around it. Now, I'm not specifically singling those two out, but what I'm saying is that where I get a little bit nervous is when people become so confident and compelling and convincing about something that ultimately is never totally within our control. If multidimensional reality is real, and I certainly believe and experience that it is, then there will always be a limit on the degree to which we control it. So if we are appeasing or appealing to spirits, well, there's some discretion on their part. If we're working with subtle energy, well, there's a universe of subtle energy. Now, some would say that what I'm suggesting is negative, that in some ways my resistance to the idea that we can completely control our relationship to other dimensions of reality is somehow sabotaging our capacity to work with those realms. Well, this is complicated because it's true. It's absolutely true that confidence, trust, faith, certainty, emotional investment are absolutely essential to invoking and evoking our connection to other dimensions. On the other hand, it is also important to recognize that we can be passionate, committed, dedicated, devoted, and yet mindful that those feelings don't turn into a kind of absolutism or a kind of spiritual religiosity that makes our path the only path, or our view of multidimensional reality the only view of multidimensional reality. I think the simplest way to summarize my concern is that multidimensional reality is based on the idea that or the experience, that there are dimensions of our reality that exceed and exist beyond our ordinary senses, our ordinary mind. Well, if that's true, then we should always have some humility in how we talk about it and how we explain it. Now, having said that, I think it's important to go do some reading, go do some investigating. Whatever aspect of multidimensional living appeals to you, whether it's channeled material or learning about aliens or learning about life beyond death, I don't care what it is, but I'd say it's worth doing the research. Go explore, go read, and then remember that what matters most is what feels truthful, not necessarily what you can absolutely prove. Truthfulness is an important element of the spiritual journey because, again, we at best are experiencing dimensions of reality that we can only explain in analogy and metaphor. So, the first principle today is let's get over our resistance and do a little digging, do a little study. The second principle is to say, is this plausible for those of you that are doubtful? I'd say it's beyond plausible. I'd say it's absolutely essential to consider. If we simply look at the world of physics today, the material study of the material world, we already have a precedent for understanding that we are multidimensional beings. In theoretical physics today, it is estimated that there are between 9 and 11 additional dimensions of reality to explain the equations of existence that we live on today. That essentially a 3D reality is just not enough to account for the existence of the universe and all the phenomena that we see. So the jury's still out on how many dimensions, but it seems pretty clear there's a bunch more. And then let's look at our senses. What we now know is that human senses, like how we perceive the world and how we know ourselves and each other, we say there's 5, but again, in the world of physical science, we've concluded that there are at least 20, and some say even closer to 30. Subtle senses that, for example, the birds may share, that insects may share, ways of perceiving and navigating subtle energy fields, temperature, space, and so on. So it's absolutely essential to consider, and that's where we're going to wrap up today. Part 2 of this is going to go into why it matters and what are the benefits mentally, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Stay tuned. Here comes part 2.